All right, good to have you here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to the monthly work session of the Athens-Clarke County Mayor and Commission. We have three items that are on our agenda today. We'll hear in just a second about some recommendations from the Government Operations Committee about our long underway leasing policy. We'll then hear recommendations from the GICH Committee about some planning and zoning opportunities around affordable housing. And then lastly, we'll have our National EMS Semi-Annual Performance Update. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Andrew Saunders, who will talk about the GOC recommendation. So we'll walk all the way through the recommendation and then be able to talk about next steps with it.
Thank you, Mayor. So what we're going to do today is review recommended changes to the unified leasing policy that have been developed in the Government Operations Committee. As a part of this, we'll go through the history, how the policy currently works, and some of the flaws that have emerged with that. Talk about the changes that GOC has recommended and cover next steps. Our history with this goes back nearly 6 years. It actually originates because we were renewing nonprofit leases on an ad hoc basis, just as they expired. And the commission at the time noticed that there was a disparity between those nonprofits that were led by minority leadership versus those that were led by Caucasian leadership. While that was not intentional, it was certainly in practice. And so at the time, the mayor signed that to the Government Operations Committee to create a policy. Policy came out of committee actually right before COVID in 2020. And because of the timing, the GOC recommended that the rents that would be applied not be applied for the first year. In 2021, going into 22, that was actually extended at that point because of the economic impacts that were still lingering from the pandemic. In 23, we went to put the policy into practice. Noticed some bumps in the road, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. And then at that point, rents were deferred. It was sent back to GOC for work and then came back out of GOC. At that point, the commission then returned it back to GOC. So we bounced in and out a bit. In 24, rents were again deferred while this was under work. And then at the end of 25, the GOC has recommended a policy update. The mayor, your body, Mayor and Commission, has actually already approved deferral through the of rents through the remainder of this fiscal year. And so the next implementation opportunity would arrive in July. So the current policy that was adopted in 2020 did a few things. First, it addressed tenants by different categories. So it separated out for-profit tenants, which in this case, I believe we just have one. At this time, federal and state agencies recognizing that those can be unique, that there are instances where it's in our best interest to try to pursue rents of a high value, and there may be other instances where the commission may want to discount that deeply. And all others were under a very complex formula. In addition to that, the policy addressed a few other things. It established that Athens-Clarke would not be paying for utilities in these facilities. At the time, there were actually two that were receiving facility subsidies. Established some maintenance expectations, perhaps even optimistically. Spoke to rental revenue share, so where the buildings were being used for leases, again, kind of a daily lease for events or private functions. Rents above $3,600 a year that were captured on that would be shared at 10% with the unified government, and spoke to the opportunity to use short-term leases as a bit of a legal workaround when we were partnering on things like grants and other items. I will point out that while this body has never moved to fully implement the policy as it relates in particular to our nonprofit agencies, other portions of the policy have been implemented. So under this, we've seen renewals for a for-profit tenant, I think 2 state agency leases. We did suspend and discontinue utility payments. We've also implemented rental revenue share. So right now we have 2 tenants that remit an annual payment to us that reflect the portion of that share. The formula that applied to agencies that were predominantly nonprofits and quasi-government was incredibly complex. And that's because it was actually trying to accomplish a little bit of everything and perhaps to its own detriment. So at its base, it considered things like location, size, type, landscape services, maintenance impacts to establish kind of the base rent of any given facility. It then had some overarching caps. So one of the things it said is that no agency should pay more than 25% of their average annual income as rent. And that would be from established records or forecast. And then also looking at the exchange of money between us and predominantly quasi-government agencies, identified that we don't really want to give money to the library just to take money back from the library. And so it exempted anybody that was receiving more than $60,000 a year in funding. In addition to that, it had opportunities for reductions. So one was a lower level of annual funding. At the time, that only applied to one agency. They would be qualified for a 25% discount. And then most notably had an opportunity for what was phrased a community benefits agreement, whereby agencies could go on record and speak to what value and benefits they were adding into the community. And in exchange for that, the commission had the opportunity to discount their rent 80%. That community benefits agreement was intentionally open-ended. So it literally, the language you see here in italics is exactly what was on the application. It was aligned with our then strategic commitments, which were something that preempted or predated our strategic plan. And the idea is that any agency could fill in how they felt like they were supporting these 6 items. And so in that framework, it was the intention of the policy at the time that staff would not call balls and strikes on it, that agencies would put down what value they thought they would bring. Staff would relay that to the commission, and the commission would then decide if that was deemed to be a community benefit or not, and thereby getting the rental reduction. We'll talk about that a bit more in a second. Here are what would just be the based facility cost under that policy. So this is accounting for size, location, services that are being offered, and so on. One thing that you'll note is that a number of facilities over in East Athens are proportionally less, and that's because the policy acknowledged that those facilities operating within a NERSA, a neighborhood revitalization strategy area, should be priced significantly less than those that are in other portions of the community. So the challenges of that policy as we got into implementation. Perhaps one of the biggest was that really complex formula that I talked about with you and those various caps, a lot of that existed because we did not differentiate between quasi-governmental agencies, things like the library and the health department, versus just your bread and butter 501c3 nonprofits. We were trying to create one policy that addressed both, but yet we are financially backing most of those quasi-government agencies at a high level. And so we were trying to contort the formula to acknowledge that. Another shortcoming is that the policy did not account for tenant investments that offset ACC Gov cost. And that has actually been perhaps the most common way that Athens-Clarke County receives some compensation for the use of the facilities. So in recent history, we've seen upgrades made by the Neighborhood Health Center, by the Cottage over providing counseling services on the east side. And there's probably at least, Advantage Behavioral also made some investments, but yet the policy didn't really acknowledge what role those played. And then most notably why it was returned back to committee was that open-ended approach to community benefits agreements. Because it was open-ended, there was a risk that it could be arbitrary and capricious. So Gavin and I, if we were our own mayor and commission, we might decide that one agency that espouses a series of benefits is worthy of that reduction, and another agency that is seemingly espouses similar benefits is not worthy. And generally, laws prohibit you from treating equal parties in unequal manner. Similarly, the whole reason for the existence of the community benefits agreement and anything that came thereafter was really to also acknowledge that we needed to not have a gratuity being involved in our relationship with these agencies. GIC recommended. They recommended a series of things. First, they recommend that quasi-governmental entities, so library, downtown development authority, advantage behavioral, and 80, advantage, anyhow, sorry, there's one more in there at least.
I think Athens neighborhood.
Athens neighborhood is actually not a quasi-governmental, but the health department is. Thank you. That they would be moved into the state and local agency category, which says that they will be addressed on a case-by-case basis as recommended by the manager and approved by the mayor and commission. So that means each one of those would be a unique discussion. And the reality is that many, if not most of them, would go into something other than rent. So for example, state law says that we must provide the health department with an operating location. Under that assumption, we really probably shouldn't charge a lease for it. Similarly, we provide parking for downtown Athens parking system in the parking deck. We provide not parking, office space. We actually capture some value for that in our revenue share agreement for downtown parking. And so it's really in the best interest of our government that we do capture that in our accounting because it generates a bit more revenue for the general fund out of those parking operations. The second thing is that it would acknowledge that agencies that make capital investments that offset ACC Gov cost could be eligible for rental reductions as approved by the commission, but that those rental reductions could not exceed the amount of those investments. So if I, let's say, have a board member that runs an HVAC company and there's a process by which I want to help replace the HVAC unit at the facility I lease, perhaps the fair market value of that is $50,000. The commission could then consider up to $50,000 in rent deferral because that's arguably a cost that we'll be paying no matter what. It also recommends abandoning the formulaic approach and just setting leases for nonprofit facilities at a flat rate of $6 a square foot. Once that flat rate is applied, there are two opportunities to qualify for rent reductions. There is a 50% reduction if you meet 6 of 13 substantial public benefit criteria, and there's an opportunity to go down to $1 if you meet 9 of 13 of those criteria. And lastly, the current policy has some fairly optimistic language about how rent might be actually added to for accelerated wear and tear. Instead of trying to do that, just simply a damage clause that says that if you use the facility more aggressively than, say, your average thing, you cause damage that's left behind when you're done, that you may be held accountable for that. To be quite frank, this has not been a major problem for us in the past outside of one portion of a facility. Those 13 criteria are listed here. Instead of being open-ended, what the committee focused on were overarching criteria that could be demonstrated through various paper trails, that staff would have good authority to call those balls and strikes because they're not opinion pieces now. Either they exist or they don't exist. Ultimately, they will still come before the commission with information about them. And you'll see that under these first 6 criteria, the first three are focused kind of on organizational structure and governance. The next 2 talk a little bit about the programs and the cost of those programs being offered out of those facilities. 6 and 7 talk about the facility utilization. So the idea being that if you're receiving a discounted or deeply discounted facility rent, it's in our interest that it not just sit there stagnant, that it not be empty. Arguably, Athens-Clarke County staff or another community agency could be making use of that facility. 8, 9, 10, and 11 focus on financial aspects. So are you filing your paperwork with the IRS? Where are your funding streams originating? Are you participating in third-party audits or getting statements prepared by a CPA? And then the last 2 are around access and transparency and discussion with the GOC. So what would happen when a nonprofit comes forward for rent is we would have these 13 criteria. We would have the associated documentation that could be used for these criteria. And as that dialogue is back and forth with staff, the documentation is prepared. You meet 6 or 9 of these, you're then recommended to the commission at either a 50% rent, which would come down to $3 a square foot, or that there's such substantial benefit that we feel comfortable placing you at $1 per year. So what does that look like? On the fourth column here, you see the little tiny italicized numbers. So those were the base cost under the prior policy before we got into a whole host of layered discount opportunities. In the fifth column, you'll see the base cost for this policy with the recommended changes. So this is the maximum that any one entity would be asked to pay if they're occupying that facility and unwilling or unable to demonstrate that they meet those criteria that we just reviewed. Certainly then, if they meet 6 or more, they would qualify for that reduced rate. That's the second to last column. And then if they meet 9 or more, that we could demonstrate that they're eligible for $1. I've noted some facilities in here. So the library, the health department, Suite A of the Miriam Moore Center, which is actually also occupied by the health department, and portions of the North Avenue building that are occupied by Advantage, simply being as occupied by a quasi-governmental agency. And so therefore, we don't have to go through these complex calculations. Next steps. So this will be on the January agenda setting for Mayor and Commission vote in February. If the commission votes to accept the policy changes, we would then spend the next few months engaging with the tenant, going back and forth with the paperwork and providing opportunities to renew rents. Those leases would come for renewal before the commission in the May-June cycle. One thing to note is this can be done in discussion with agencies that are in practice with it, so predominantly those nonprofits. For example, as it sits today, a nonprofit may not actually have an updated set of bylaws. And so maybe they only have 8 criteria. Well, under that, I think we would be open to offering them a 1-year lease and giving them that year in which to shore up their community benefits to demonstrate that they can meet these criteria and come back before the commission under the higher level of discount. For that, ask questions.
Yeah, questions from the group? Movita.
This is so much simpler than before. I really, sounds like common sense to me. 2 things. In your presentation, just for historic information, can you, when we identify those nonprofits, and I guess that, what year was it, 2019?
Go back to history.
Yeah, back to history. Could you, in your PowerPoint, can you list those nonprofits that we're talking about back then, what their rent was? It was a chart.
Sure, yeah, and I can, I'd be happy to share that with the commission afterwards. Fundamentally, Town and Gown, no rent. The Welcome Center, no rent. Health Department, no rent. Miriam Moore Health Service Center, which is Athens Neighborhood Health, and the 3 suites all had rent, albeit not at market rent rates, still had rent. North Avenue was maintenance in lieu. Fire Hall 2 was no rent plus a utility subsidy. Taylor Grady House was no rent plus a utility subsidy. The Cottage was no rent, but in exchange for some investments they made prior to that, they had paid a lower rent. And the West Broad Service Center, which is operated by HCDC, had a rent in which they were not paying.
And my next question is, yes, if you could send that to us, and I appreciate it.
Sure.
And my next question was, I looked at all of these and I don't see Hancock Community.
Yeah, so it's actually that last one, what we call the West
West
Broad
Broad
Community
Center, okay.
Service Center.
Okay. Do you want to put that in parentheses? Because everybody knows it's Hancock.
Yeah, when I send the follow-up information, I'll have the facility name and the current tenant, along with their historical rent.
Okay, thank you.
Allison and Karen.
Yeah, I was curious how, one of the concerns I have is when we give discounted rent for whatever criteria or way, and then it's subleased rented out
Right.
for profit. Was that addressed in how an entity, well, let's just say, pop-up vintage t-shirt sell
Sure.
at the old fire hall, when they're paying $1 or rent? You guys discuss how to handle that?
Yeah,
Or if it's an issue.
The policy retains the prior recommendation for a rental revenue share above $3,600 a year. The unified government would get 10%. That has been in practice since the policy was implemented in 2020. The two facilities that offer or pay those revenue shares based on their self-reported numbers, one is Historic Athens out of the fire hall, and the second is the Taylor Grady organization out of the Taylor Grady house.
Okay, so those aren't reporting goose eggs.
They are not reporting goose eggs.
Okay, so the self-reporting and trusting the landlord-tenant relationship seems to be happening.
It does. Yes.
Okay, all right, so I can just summarize that the process that we have in play on that is staying, and it's reported consistently
That's correct.
by the two that we know of that do that, and that does cover the two. Thank you.
What, and I guess with that, is that in writing?
Hold on, turn it back.
Yeah, I have some questions here on different pages, so I think most of them are pretty short, but the leasing rates, I'm looking at the proposed changes one, this page here at the back, and I said, and you mentioned something about the leases, like some of them, how long are the leases for?
So all of our leases are 1-year leases, and they usually come with renewals. So our template is 1 year with 4 1-year renewals that are mutually agreed. We do that so that if the unified government needs to go a different way, we would provide notice and choose to not renew the space.
So the entities don't have any assurance that, other than historical, that their lease could be disappear in the next, right?
Sure.
Okay,
And that's because legally this commission can't bind future commissions.
okay. And on the criteria, the 13 criteria, I assume from the way you're laying this out that staff would make an evaluation and present it to the commission to vote on. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, were there any, I know that some of these came up, I guess, in the GOC. Were there any criteria that you discussed but not included, or?
Yes, there were a number of criteria. I'd say the one that was initially put in and then we walked away from was, trying to remember, I don't know if you recall.
Maybe you know, she's.
One Taylor Grady was.
No, there was one about like maintenance cost or facility. We would be happy to share with you all the criteria that were considered, but not.
And how did the, I mean, you mentioned something here, how did the maintenance costs get considered in this?
So in short order, they don't.
Okay.
The $6 a square foot without discounts is generally offsets some of the maintenance cost. And every time the GIC has looked at this, they have looked at data about the cost of services that are provided into this facility. And what you find is even that fair market rents on many cases are not offsetting Athens-Clarke County's capital cost of the facility. So it is an expense to our community to host these sites that are used for other agencies. Some of those agencies are operating services that arguably we would have to fill if they didn't. So one example is EDC does housing counseling, and then the cottage does counseling following domestic violence and other sexual assault type activities. But every time because that has been asked, we've looked at, well, maybe we just do maintenance in lieu of rent. We don't have any evidence the agencies can afford it.
Okay. So if an agency, I'm not sure I completely followed everything there, but if an agency for Town and Gown, for example, put in significant amount of money to renovate something that's not covered by Athens-Clarke County. Do they have any assurance, like in the legal thing, like, I don't, let's put a stage or something, redid the stage and it cost them, I'm making a number up again, 100 grand or something. Do they have it, is there anything in their documents with us that says, if by any chance next year we don't renew this, we will, do they have any guarantee that any of that will get back?
So, generally, no. That's been handled in the past in one kind of common way. So the two agencies that have some longer term commitments right now, one is the cottage, excuse me, they're on like year 8 or 9 of a 10-year commitment. And then Athens Neighborhood Health actually had, I believe, up to 20 years. But to speak to Attorney Drake's comment, what it says is that Athens-Clarke County still reserves the right to end this lease at any time with notice. But in that case, there's some liquidated damages. So if you put 100,000 in and we had envisioned committed to maybe 10 renewals, well, if we stop those renewals at year 4, we may owe you $40,000 or $50,000 to help them recoup some of those investments we would have made anyhow.
And on number 6, criteria number 6 is organization provides evidence of an MOU with another agency or a public use policy.
Sure.
What does that mean? A public use policy defines how the facility will be available to meet other.
Yeah, so this is
What would
kind of
satisfy that as, yes, they do this.
we heard even in the last commission meeting, a lot of times there's demand for kind of community meeting space. And in this case, it would be space that's not for rent. So if we're making, let's grab a facility out of the air, HCDC's space, if they're saying when we're after hours, between hours of X and Y, this space is available to neighborhood associations and community groups to come in and have meetings. They should be under this kind of format. Here's the expectations on cleaning up. Well, now the benefit is not just for their organization, but the broader community. So we would ask for that policy in writing. The other thing would be where there's maybe not a fully occupied space. We see this a little bit with Athens Tutorial, and in fact, the Taylor Grady space, they actually have MOUs with other agencies to kind of co-share that space under an umbrella. So that's what that would look like. Either one.
And then my last question is on the change to lease rates. Some of them, the new base rate is lower than
Right.
prior base rate, and some of them it's higher.
Yep.
Can you help me understand that?
Yeah, two major driving factors. So the prior base rate had a whole bunch of criteria. But the biggest drivers were location and level of service. And so with location, facilities that were in neighborhood revitalization strategy areas were valued at their base at $5 a square foot instead of 15. So you saw some disparity there. And then depending on what services were being provided by the unified government, those rates would go up or down. The new base cost is just a simple $6 a square foot. Doesn't matter where you're located, doesn't matter what services you do or do not use, because the discussion's really focused around what benefits can we demonstrate that you provide into the community that would justify whether or not there should be rental reduction.
So that like, and that explains what, going into that, why the Taylor Grady base rate went from 152,000 to 3,000, but the West Broad service area went from 5,800 to 9,000, went up 800.
That's correct.
Right. Thank you. That's it.
No, actually, I think Allison helped me out. Thank you.
Your questions?
If I may, Mayor, just to kind of, this, as has been said, certainly moves us kind of the path that everybody was hoping to make a more simple process and those kinds of things. However, some of the questions also illustrate, and I told Andrew, I said, well, I'm at least going to say this out loud, which is it may be worth the property committee or somebody taking a look at, should we continue to own all of these buildings? As has been explained, the capital cost and the maintenance costs associated with these are not covered by whatever lease that we may recover. Not suggesting that any of these should go away, but I think there certainly ought to be a conversation in light of all of our other capital needs for buildings, and facilities that we operate out of as well. So I'm vocalizing that, and we'll see if it goes anywhere.
At least as sort of committee assignment provider, picking up the baton from Bob, I'll be assigning a kind of a variant to that to the property committee. I mean, sort of as Andrew outlined, some of these are properties where we're doing service provision. We're doing the kind of community support that, we may have to take on or we may provide funding for. Otherwise, other properties, really, we don't have any missions. And, certainly a big observation for me over the last 7 years of this conversation is really just how much staff time goes into this under the best of circumstances. Andrew and his team, I mean, really, formerly Gavin, when he was at Central Services, so many folks are just consuming hundreds and hundreds of hours in engagement. And then the piece that Bob mentioned, obviously, these capital expenditures, in some of Bob's prior community work, there's been a model, whether through a public authority or otherwise, of taking a property and if it's historic property, putting an historic easement on the property and potentially even having some kind of first right of return if the use is abandoned. But where we can really concentrate our dollars, our energy, and our time, on those things that are core local government functions. So anyhow, be looking for that probably as soon as the month you vote on this. So got Melissa and then Allison again.
Yeah, I want to address the idea of relinquishing responsibility for some of these properties, which I don't necessarily think is a bad idea. But I'd hate to see some of these properties go on the private market and become profit generating properties that agencies like this could no longer afford. I'd rather see something like a land use or a land lease type agreement where the government maintains ownership of the land underneath and we might sell the building, much like the Athens Land Trust operates with their housing model. Whereas, if that entity were to, give up their mission and no longer want the property, government would have first right of refusal. We'd maintain that land ownership. We'd have a great deal of control over the future of that building.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I think that there's a model where we can ensure that there's continuity of use. If we're talking about a theater group that's occupied a property for north of 50 years, we can ensure that that property is for the theater group, not for frat parties.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to see us sell it and then, incentivize the redevelopment of that property where we have no control over, the impacts on the surrounding community.
Yeah, and that's exactly some of the things that we talked about in property committee. Our first assignment was working on how to lease out Taylor Grady. And if you go back to the price, that 152, when that popped up in 2019, I think that's when the junior league said, we're out. We can't do that. We're out. Interestingly enough, it ended up staying $1 for the whole time, but they were out. That was their signal. And so going through everything we did for it to be leased as it is, we also lined the complications and Andrew in the middle of the two, us being landlords to two very active groups over there, just the two you're talking about, Taylor Grady and the Town and Gown Theater, which that building is specifically for theater. They have invested a great deal into it, which shows passion, tragedy as well there. But when it was my thought, Kelly, I'm glad that will come to property committee sooner because I thought that we would meet next when the space allocation study comes. But if we can start on this first, it'd be great. Thank you.
I'm looking at the old Firehouse Hall and the West Broad Service Center. By any chance, I'm on this historic designation now. I'm not high off of that. Are those historic possibly? I know the West Broad Service Center is because I know the history, some of the history.
Old Fire Hall may fall into the historic Cobham district that's defined in our zoning code.
I would like to, just for record, as we move forward, I still like this. I'm not trying to change anything, but I do think that the West Broad Service Center has a major, I think it started with the 4-H club or something back then. But those things, so we don't get to a place where it's a push. We can already identify some of these, especially in predominantly African-American communities. We don't have to make this push, but if we can identify just maybe that one, I would appreciate it.
All right, thanks, everyone. As you saw, this is coming soon to an agenda item near you, and so we look forward to seeing it under those auspices. I'd like to ask a colleague, Commissioner Thornton, who sits on the Georgia Institute for Community Housing, just to introduce the next one to us that came out of work that she's been involved in there.
Okay, look at this team. Don't they look good? We were tasked by the GICH committee. We were first divided into committees after the mayor assigned the housing study to the GICH committee. And we immediately went into committee mode. So our committee was assigned to tackle access to home ownership. Access to home ownership really brought out the barriers that causes some of the access or the lack of. So our committee members are, and everybody's not here, but I'm glad Mr. Lonnie came in because he also was part of this discussion and even gave us a timeline that all of the committees should try to meet. So with that, I'm not gonna hold you up because I know all y'all are so excited about this. Our committee members was Reverend Elsie Ford, Ms. Carol Williams, Mr. Fred Smith, Ms. Danielle Glimmer, Mr. Matt Hall, Mr. Charles Smith, Mr. Jeff Bishop, and Ms. Wakia Lawson. So they went beyond the call, and I think we did meet the goal that was assigned to us. And I think this is going to be educational. So I'll let them take it away.
Thanks, Coach. All right.
Ta-da. Thank you again for allowing us to speak to you today. We're delighted to make the presentation that's under our charge. To give you some brief background, in observance of the Fair Housing Month, back in April, Commissioner Thornton convened the 4th annual Fair and Affordable Housing Summit. And at that event, he asked me to speak and outline a couple of goals that could be viewed as deterrents to make housing both fair and affordable. The first goal was to put more doors in the market, which will stabilize and or reduce pricing. And the second goal is to reduce the cost of housing. Some of these are common sense goals. Fast forward to August. At the August 2025 GICH meeting, HCD Director Melinda Lord shared the mayor's charge to GICH, which reads, carry out a review of the recently completed affordable housing investment strategy and then make recommendations of actions that the mayor and commission can take from that document. We took that. 4 subcommittees were created that day, one of which was expanding access to home ownership. And that's why we're here. That subcommittee was convened by Commissioner Thornton on September 5th. At that meeting, Commissioner Thornton created another subcommittee to investigate possible zoning recommendations. And that's the 3 of us. So our subcommittee had 4 in-person meetings, numerous 5 counting this morning, numerous phone calls, emails, texts, and prior to presenting at the November 10th GICH meeting. And we want to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. But we have more than a problem. We have a housing crisis. So essentially, we think that government should remove barriers to construction that have no effect on life, health, or safety. And in Athens-Clarke County, we have a supply and demand problem which contributes to this housing crisis. There are current policies on our books that slow processes and also increase costs. We're not shooting at any of the departments. We think the planning department, public utilities department, transportation, public works departments are doing their jobs. But today we will present some minor tweaks to their playbooks that can put more doors into the market, thus stabilizing and or reducing the cost of housing. So for me personally, the changes we present today are related to justice, righting wrongs that have kept groups of people from the American dream of owning their own home. Zoning can be value neutral, but unfortunately across our country, zoning has been used for sinister purposes. We thank you for considering our recommendations, which we think will definitely increase the supply of housing and also reduce. Let's see.
So Danielle is going to walk you through our committee slides, but I was asked just to give a short legal and historical context to help understand why we have the zoning problems that we have. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Matthew Hall. I teach law at the University of Georgia. One of the classes I teach is about real estate law and how it affects housing affordability. Everyone knows that our city ordinances set the ground rules about what types of housing people are allowed to build. And the simplest way to describe the problem that we have is that beginning in the 1960s, Athens-Clarke County revised its zoning ordinance to outlaw many of the types of housing that had previously been built and that exist all over this town. They're part of the character of our neighborhoods. Just a couple of examples. You basically cannot legally build townhomes in Athens-Clarke County. They're only legal in a couple of zoning districts and they're only legal on very large lots. And so as a practical matter, they can't be built. That's why you don't see any infill townhomes. Smaller lot homes, smaller homes on smaller lots, all of those were effectively outlawed by our zoning code in the 1960s. All of the, in short, less expensive types of homes, the first rung on the housing ownership ladder, it gives people a chance to get started as homeowners. We've made those illegal. And you might ask why? Why would anyone do that? That seems kind of crazy. And there's a very well-established and ugly history that Charles alluded to about that. In the 1960s, the United States Supreme Court outlawed explicit racial exclusion. They said that you can't have racially restricted covenants that say, you know, this home can only be sold to white people. You can't, and then Congress passed the Fair Housing Act, also in the 1960s. And so the people that had been trying to exclude Black people from neighborhoods didn't stop trying to do that. They just looked for other ways to do it. And what they found was zoning. You couldn't explicitly exclude Black people. They said, how can we use what we're allowed to do, the tools available to us to exclude Black people? And so they took zoning, which originally was about, you know, factories over here, housing over here, basically just separating uses. And they just began to use zoning to remove all of the less expensive types of housing, to make those no longer an option. So Athens, Georgia did it. Athens, Georgia is not alone. This happened all over Georgia. It happened all over the United States. And it's an extremely well-documented story. There's a book by Richard Rothstein called The Color of Law that talks all about this that I recommend to people. And so just for example, they started using zoning to require large minimum lot sizes. You got to have half an acre to build a house, or you got to have a third of an acre to build a house, that sort of thing. An ostensibly neutral policy that has the effect of making housing much more expensive. They said, if we can't keep Black people out, what we'll do is we'll keep less expensive types of housing out. We'll ban apartments. We will ban duplexes. We'll ban small homes on multiple homes on a lot. You guys have all seen all around Athens, there are lots that have 3 or 4 or 5 homes, and maybe now they've been subdivided, but originally it was some family that had 3 adult children and they built a home in the backyard for each of those 3 children. There's a very common profile in Athens. And now maybe they've been subdivided. And so you have these funny shaped lots where each one only has, you know, 10-foot strip that goes to the street. And then they have part of what was once the backyard of an acre of property or something like that. Those exist all over Athens. We outlawed them. And effectively what this previous generations of this commission, frankly, did was take the types of housing that were available to poor people and to African-American people and make them illegal. And that's the way we got the zoning code that we have now. At Commissioner Thornton's request, we made a presentation to the GICH committee about this zoning history. And the response was a resounding, we need to undo this racist legacy that gave us the zoning code that we have today. And so we were asked to come up with a small package of kind of low-hanging fruit, small changes easily accomplished with text amendments that can begin to remove some of these barriers. It's not a complete fix. There's more work to be done, but it's a first step in the right direction, we think. And Danielle can take you from here and walk you through the specifics.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And again, I appreciate everybody's time being here. Some of you have already seen an iteration or two of this presentation. So thank you for being here yet again. My name is Danielle Gilmer. I'm one of the members on the GICH committee and subcommittee of the subcommittee. So welcome to this. I was just trying to find a place to sit and be able to do that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we're going to back up. Everybody has an idea of what zoning is. It can get very complicated very quickly. So let's just start from the beginning. Zoning defined. At a basic level, zoning is how government regulates land uses and densities on private land in most US cities and suburbs. That is to say, zoning controls how big of a building you can build on a particular lot and whether you can use that building for any given residential, commercial, or industrial use. The original purpose of zoning, we've kind of brought this up, was to promote health, safety, and welfare of residents by separating residential uses from industrial or other noxious uses. Zoning was a key tool using seemingly neutral rules, which has been brought up, like minimum lot size, single-family homes, to exclude minorities, particularly African Americans, from desirable neighborhoods, a practice that continues to impact housing patterns today. Next slide, please. So, some of the effects of zoning. Zoning restricts the supply of housing in desirable areas, leading to soaring prices and an affordability crisis. Single-family zoning effectively excludes lower-income families and people of color from affluent neighborhoods with better opportunities and services, and mandates for large lots and the separation of residential and commercial areas force car dependency, increasing emissions and making communities less walkable. This is actually our first zoning map, created in 1955 of Athens-Clarke County. Did a little research there. Let's see. Next slide. So, currently, what is legal to build in Athens-Clarke County? On the left, you see a home that is 7,100 square feet, single family. On the right, you see the Mark downtown. It's a 760,000 square foot mixed use development. I always say bonus points for who can tell me whose house it is on the left.
We know.
We know.
Everybody knows? Kirby, smart. Yes.
It's
old
old house.
His old house, correct.
Yes.
I apologize. Yes, his previously owned house. That is Kirby's house, 7,100 square foot home. Single family mixed use development. This is what's legal to build here currently. Next slide, please. What is illegal to build in Athens? So this slide is a development in Decatur, right outside of Athens, Atlanta, in DeKalb County. This is their workforce housing cottage courts. So these homes range from 528 square feet to 1,582 square feet. Things that are important to know that these workforce housing units with prices ranging from $210,000 to $305,000, which Decatur officials call affordable for anyone earning Metro Atlanta's area to median income. More importantly to note is that the median home price at the time of this build was $651,000. So when you take that into consideration, 200,000 does seem a bit more affordable. Affordability is relative and ever changing. Next slide. Thank you. So as we've said, we are here because we have come up with 6 suggestions for zoning reforms to increase the housing supply and affordability for Athens. We want to recognize that these are not new ideas. These are some of the ideas that have gone on to become reforms and changes in cities and states throughout the country to help create more affordable housing. These are also suggestions that have been brought up here in Athens. There are likely several commissioners and staff here in this room who have heard them or spoke on them before. These are the handful of simple tweaks that could begin to address the problem with very minor changes to our current zoning code. This package of suggestions is not a complete fix, as we've stated, but they do represent that low-hanging fruit, the simple, small changes that could facilitate creation of more housing units at lower prices. Next slide, please. Here we go with number 1. Permit accessory dwelling units on all parcels zoned single family, so all RS zones. We're asking to remove the ban on kitchen cooking facilities, which are the stoves in those guest houses, and allow attached as well as detached guest suites or mother-in-law suites. So allowing basement and backyard apartments in all single family zones to support seniors, caregivers, and workforce housing while keeping neighborhood character, helping families stay together, and supporting stable housing near community resources. And allowing for that full kitchen supports long-term instead of short-term rental scenarios. It also supports aging in place, multi-generational households, and incremental growth using existing infrastructure. Number 2, legalize infill townhomes, single-family units. We're asking to permit townhomes or attached single-family homes for sites less than 2 acres, which is what currently is allowed on sites greater than 2 acres is where you can put those townhomes. We're also asking to allow up to 3 units per normal lot. So this will have several benefits for Athens. It will provide more housing choices at lower cost for aspiring homeowners. It will enable Athens to more efficiently use its existing road, sewer, and water infrastructure and provide more property tax revenue to maintain that infrastructure. It will enable local builders to more efficiently use our limited available land to provide new housing opportunities on the lower rungs of the housing ladder in existing neighborhoods close to schools, jobs, parks, and other amenities. Next slide, please. All right, remove the barriers to smaller, less expensive homes, including manufactured homes. They're asking to remove the minimum square footage requirement for single and multifamily and direct planning staff to develop a proposal to allow modern manufactured homes in all residential zones. Our current code requires that every single-family residential unit must be at least 1,000 square feet in most zoning districts and 600 square feet in others. Manufactured homes refer to homes that were built after 1976 when the Housing and Urban Development HUD passed various guidelines, which clarified the building standards and codes for manufactured houses. On average, the new manufactured home listed at $124,000 back in 2024. And by comparison, in 2025, the average price of a traditional stick-built home is slightly over $356,000. The US Census Bureau and HUD report that manufactured homes are half the price per square foot of a site-built home. All right, we're halfway there, y'all. Going on to number 4. Permit homeowners to subdivide their lot by reducing or eliminating minimum street frontage requirements. So legalize access easements for up to 5 lots or flag lots to allow owners to subdivide deep parcels, which is something Matt had brought up. This will create more buildable lots close to jobs, schools, and amenities, and permit use of easements for sewer and water connection. I'm going to go on. Keep on that slide, I apologize. So Athens outlawed flag lots very recently, approximately 15 years ago, by adding a provision to code that required that every lot must have a minimum street frontage. So a minimum street frontage of 50 to 75 feet in RS 5, 8, and 15, and even more in RS 25 and 40. The sole purpose of this rule is to prevent subdivision of large lots. This harms affordability and reduces the available choices in housing, while also creating an unsustainable burden on our road, sewer, and water infrastructure. And it does nothing to promote the health or welfare of Athenians. Next slide, please. So more examples of flag lots. Flag lots are given their name because if it's not obvious, they kind of look like a flag. So this slide has on the top left, A, B, and C, if you can see those, are the flag lots, while D and E are those front lots, those front homes. The two other pictures show an access easement or courtyard development that can be used to create more homes on that existing land. All right, and next slide, please. Number 5, legalize and encourage starter homes in all residential districts. So by expanding housing choices by allowing small lot subdivision for single family homes throughout all residential zones. Incentivize construction of smaller and thus less costly new homes by allowing more units on smaller lots for local builders who build smaller homes. Currently, 85% of Athens residential land is zoned for single family detached houses only. These are the most expensive type of home because they have the highest land costs for any home type. And high land costs require builders to build larger homes on each parcel in order to make a profit. 63% of the residential land in Athens is zoned for very large lots, 15,000 square feet of land or more. With a rapidly growing population, requiring so much land for each household artificially restricts the supply of new housing and thus drives up the price of housing beyond what most Athenians can afford. Roughly half of the households in Athens consist of 1 or 2 people, while many Athens neighborhoods contain exclusively 3 to 4 bedroom or larger homes. And 6, reduce parking minimums. So we ask that we review the city's parking requirements and identify areas where reductions may be feasible to support smaller scale infill development. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation, urban and suburban parking reforms can optimize land use, encourage use of low carbon transportation, and lower development costs, all while raising funds for streetscape and transit improvements. Land is expensive. It can be 20 to 50% of the overall cost of a new home development. Dedicating part of a building's footprint to parking imposes both a direct cost because developers must pay to build the parking and an indirect cost because it leaves to less space for housing. These development costs are passed along to renters and owners, decreasing affordability. Next slide, please. Parking reform means letting business owners and builders, homeowners and renters decide. Ooh, that's a fun one. I'm gonna stop there. So this is an example of, this is living space versus parking space. And for those that can't see this very well, on the left is a 2-bedroom apartment at 675 square feet. And the size for 2 parking spaces on average is 650 square feet. So off-street parking mandates greatly increase housing prices. Reductions help small local developers and keep neighborhoods more livable. In short, eliminating parking mandates doesn't make parking disappear, but does provide more choices about how much to provide and make better use of the parking we already have. Parking spaces will still get built, but so will more homes for the residents of Athens. And those are our 6 suggestions. We've left room for questions.
Can we take questions?
Now, let me do part 2. Y'all wake up.
Stay with y'all.
Do we have them?
Oh, I'm doing my job.
While Commissioner Thornton's passing out I apologize. We did have the memo with the longer descriptions of today's presentation that was to be passed out. It is now in your email inboxes. I'm sorry we didn't have the printed versions today, but the descriptions and further background on each of these items are now in your email.
Okay, everybody.
Did I miss anybody that has? Two more. Oh. Speak up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Wyakia Lawson, also on the Expanding Access to Home Ownership GICH subcommittee. And our I'm on a subcommittee of a subcommittee dealing with income tiers. And so these are recommendations dealing with income tiers. So this group was recommendations about planning and zoning, and we're talking about income tiers. Sorry, we didn't bring the slides for that, but it's pretty quick. So the first chart just tells us currently what are the income tiers, HUD's income tiers for Athens-Clarke County. So we know that the median family income in Athens-Clarke County is now $94,300. The part we're looking at really, if you look at that bottom row, low income, 80%, one of the things that's happening in Athens-Clarke County is that based on where many of the incomes are for the people we're trying to help, because of how the incomes are situated, there's a group is being failed to be helped. So for example, if we take a 2-family income, we would, when it comes to giving out for benefits and resources, for example, the grant that the city gave out for that First American. If I were a single mother, I would have to make under $60,400 to access that grant. If I made $62,000, I'm still struggling, but I would be disqualified. So one of the things that's happening is people who are right over these income limits are not being helped. They will be considered what we call moderate income. And so what's happening is a lot of people are being left out because where the 80% stops is not in a position to help people when it comes to these housing related things, because it's stopping at a point where it's below what's needed to buy a house in Athens-Clarke County. So a rule of thumb, just in banking in general, if you want to know how much somebody's going to qualify for a loan, if they're not into too much debt, take their annual income and multiply it by 4. So a person who makes $35,000, right? They're probably going to be qualified in that $140,000 range. Now, of course, we know that's not enough to purchase a house. Even if they made $50,000 a year, 50 times 4, 200,000, still not enough to buy a house. And so what's happening is, even at 60,000, 240. So there's a group that needs help that is being left out because they're right over what's needed to qualify. So one of the things is that we're proposing, one of 2 proposals that we actually look at. One is called income banding, and that's that first chart on page 2. And it's something the USDA now uses for its rural development, its direct loan. And what it does is it takes it in groups of 4. If on the first page you notice, there's a highlighted at the 4 person is bolded, and at the 8 person is bolded. So what USDA has done is say, okay, rather than just limit it, let's being so specific, we're going to say 1 to 4 people, you can make up to the maximum. 4 to 8 people, you can make up to the maximum. And so what that does, if I'm the single mother who is making $68,000, $65,000 a year, $70,000 a year, I still qualify because I'm in the 1 to 4. Does that make sense to everyone? Mm-hmm. And so that's one proposal where we're asking that Clarke County considers, just do income banding. The other thing if not income banding, we're saying add a moderate tier. And so we chose the level 115%. It doesn't have to be 115%. So anybody who makes from 80% to 115% AMI, let's just create a tier called moderate. And then this is what the numbers will look like for moderate tier. And so that we can include more people. And so that is our proposal and suggestion so that people can qualify for these benefits and resources that we have.
Is it also about qualifying for mortgages?
Yes. Well, what do you mean?
I mean, just,
It helps you because you're able to get that down payment and closing cost assistance that you need. And it helps like even sometimes, you know, with First American, sometimes you can't find enough people in the range that you need. And it's like people are there who need help, but they're $2,000 over what that limit said, you know? So it does, it will help more people. Yes.
so we as a commission put this into play, or do we have to get, okay, from the feds?
No, only if you're using federal money. So the money you gave First American was Clarke County money. So you can decide what you want tiers to be. Now, if you're pulling HUD money down, you have to use HUD tiers.
So you know what I'm saying, is ARPA money that we gave First America, could it fall in this category? That's what I'm asking.
If we have this model.
Yes.
And I guess the question I'm asking though, this is a model that we could implement?
Or funds that we direct, right? So like we can't tell, Synovus Bank next door, you're going to.
Right, don't come like,
Right,
right,
we
we,
are federally regulated, yes, but for the dollars we direct, we could specify the banding.
And both of these proposals, proposal 1 and proposal 2, could we put forward, like for the bank? That wasn't clear. Like either one of these for the money.
You've brought these sort of as variants, right?
I brought this as an either or, but you could say both, but I brought it as an either or. You can look at it this way or you can look at it this way. But when you can tell the bank, these are the guidelines we're now going to use. Or in the future, when we give money, we're going to use these. So Jeff actually is part of my subcommittee, but he's out of town
I
right now.
guess I'm saying is like legally, in the legal world, are there any, like, do we have to, if we have a program, can we make our own?
Well,
With the ARPA funds, we certainly can.
Okay.
yeah, well, I was asking,
yeah, and this came up because Melinda Lloyd told us that we can come up with our own tier system. That's the reason that new subcommittee was created. So, yeah. And I see she stepped out just to.
She had it at 2:00.
Okay, I got another question. So, thank you all, first of all the committee. So, with developers, talking about this income, the houses that we may wanna try to build. Have that conversation been had? Because again, I guess I'm thinking, do we have local builders or developers that's willing to build these type of housing? Because, there's always everything about, what about profit margin? So, have any of those conversations been had? Again, I love what y'all talking about and what we can do, but do we have people that's willing to work with us, build those type of houses that we might need in order to make this program work?
I can tell you, I've met with 8 developers when Brad was here. And all of them said there were differences, but the biggest problems they had is our zoning, period. I mean, there are other things, of course, land costs and all
Right.
that, but one of their biggies was zoning. So I do know that there are developers interested in doing affordability, but you're right, they gotta make a profit.
Right.
But if we have pathways that could let them make a profit, yes, I can answer that question undoubtedly, that we do have developers and subcontractors.
There's 2 parts to that. That part, and the other part that Mr. Smith deals with is they get them built, who are they gonna sell them to?
Yeah.
And that is the getting people qualified for loans.
There you
And we have to
Bingo.
we have to have this lineup to get them the resources to help them qualify for those loans. We can get them to the right credit score, but if they don't qualify for the down payment and closing cost assistance, how are they gonna come up with 15,000, 20,000, 25,000? And it's not that they're not trying, they have savings, but we know what happens when you start saving, then the transmission goes out on the car. You know, so it's things that happen. And so that's why we're looking at this, because we need help getting them qualified.
So, one more. Gosh, this is so good. Some of the conversation I've had, and I know we say affordability, but I always think about workforce housing. Well, some of these educators who've been educators for a number of years, take a really good salary, and they may be 80 or 90,000. And you do that 4 times that, they still can't afford that. So how do we fit that 70 to 80,000 into our?
I have some comments for both of those questions. If you look back at Danielle's workforce housing.
Right.
You know, your question about developers, there are a lot of developers who are champing at the bit to build stuff like this on a lot, let's say, where they could currently build only a single family home. What they're going to do to make money is, you know, they might have to pay quite a bit of money for the land, and they got to support it with one house. So that house gets huge,
right?
Because they're priced by the square foot. So they build a, maybe not Kirby sized, but they might build a 4,000 square foot house. If on that same lot, they can put in homes ranging from 528 to 1,582 square feet like this, all of which are affordable to the teachers that you're talking about. The total square footage may be the same, right? They're still building 4,000 square feet. And so they make just as much money, but they're able to sell them to 5 families, and that one lot can provide housing for 5 families.
And this could easily be also townhomes.
Right.
That could be 6 townhomes. One of the things I always encourage people is to think about housing differently. The other things we don't ever talk about are condos, because we think of them as Atlanta things. But there are some young teachers who would probably just like to live in a nice condo. And how many condos can we get in if we go up and just build, you know, several floors of condos? So it has to be people thinking of housing differently than just single family detached housing. Yeah.
But I love all these solutions. I love it all. But I want to talk about the reality here. Is I can say I love all this stuff, but I know that all the people who are living in single family zones we're going to hear a lot. And so I don't know where my colleagues are, but how do we address that, and how are we willing to do that? We're also going to hear a lot about, if we do this, which does happen, is this is going to be it's all going to be students in there. And so there's going to be that reaction as well. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying to my colleagues, to this committee, do you see, where do we get the political strength to do something like this?
Let me talk about a couple of things mechanistically and process.
Okay, yeah.
So what I'll do following this gathering is have a resolution on the agenda to assign these questions to the appropriate departments, most prominently planning, who of course will walk this through the planning commission, and then ultimately have it returned to us. So in terms of like the steps kind of on the on the line, that's what you would be seeing. And certainly in terms of the politics, as you hear from residents, I think, you know, what really benefits us is that we're by far not the first community to have these conversations. We've been able to see them play out quite a bit. Many of you were able to go to Gainesville, Florida, and they've done the bulk of these things in Gainesville over the last couple of years. Minneapolis, where my dad is from, did this kind of pre-COVID, 2016, 17, 18. And what you do tend to see in those cities is really incremental use of these things. You don't see like suddenly you've gone from totally one landscape of housing to another. You see there's a little bit over here and a little bit over there. In our community, I mean, kind of to the student question, you're going to see some student use of these, but you're also going to see some teacher use of them. I think, you know, there's no doubt. It's funny, I was at a middle school basketball game a couple weeks ago, and there was a very small scale builder who was sitting next to me, and he was bending my ear about just this stuff. And he's like, I don't want to go build a mega mansion, but right now that's the only thing that I can make money doing is building that 5,000 or 6,000 square foot house. I'd rather do, just like you suggested, like he build 4 or 5 tiny places that I know families like us could live in. So, that's going to have to be an ongoing conversation with constituents and community members. Without
But what I would say is when you put it out to those departments and such, that we as elected officials need those examples and visuals of those examples in those communities where things have happened and the world hasn't fallen apart, and that there are positive examples in these places, because that's where it's going to be, I need to have the tools to educate and share with constituents about how this actually plays out in reality.
Listen,
Yeah, so, I'd say the places where this has happened and the world hasn't fallen apart is in some of our existing historic neighborhoods. A walk down Grady Avenue will show you, some nice kind of, pseudo mansions, some duplexes, an apartment complex with a couple dozen apartments in it. And a couple of the houses have downstairs accessory units. But living in it, we're a unique community in that like about a third of our population is student, very transient, fairly wealthy population that comes and goes. And that is a legitimate concern. We have this idea that single family zoning excludes low income families from neighborhoods, but we've kind of had the opposite impact in our community where multifamily zoning has ended up excluding low-income families, particularly in East Athens and Hancock's in our historically Black neighborhoods that, look like single-family neighborhoods. Walking down the street, you have little single-family homes, but the zoning is multifamily, which allows the students to creep in there. I have seen some of these accessory units popping up, and one of the big impacts I see is the stormwater. I have constituents whose backyards have been washed away when their neighbor puts up a garage or a garage with an apartment on top. So I feel like, anything that we adopt that allows for additional structures, we need to pay attention to that stormwater to make sure that neighboring residents are not bearing the burden of that stormwater. Parking is the number one thing I hear about in these smaller historic neighborhoods. The streets are narrow. Often they've got weird curves to them. I'm not necessarily supportive of giving up parking mandates, particularly in neighborhoods where you do have those narrow streets. And particularly where you have a multifamily zoning that allows, multiple students to pack into a small house. What we're seeing, if Neil attests to this, we're seeing, small little 2-bedroom houses get bought up by developers. They add onto them, bust into the attic, and then they'll build a garage out back that adds another bedroom or 2. And parking is all over the place. And the value, whoever redevelops that lot is getting $1,000 a bedroom. So it's very incentivized by that multifamily zoning. I've said this before, I'd love to see us get rid of that multifamily zoning in those historic neighborhoods, but allow some of this kind of, allow some ADUs by right under certain conditions, allow townhomes by right under certain conditions. I'd really like to see us incentivize more ADUs within existing structures. If you have a garage, you're allowed to put an ADU there, or a basement, or an existing shed or something out back. It's not possible to put an ADU just anywhere. You have sewer concerns. If your backyard's lower than the sewer line, you're probably not going to get an ADU in there. There's a lot of nuance to this, and we are going to get the pushback. I'd suggest we take a deep dive into
the situation on the ground in neighborhoods that already have this kind of development and understand the benefits and the negative impacts, and understand like what our real purpose is for expanding this code. We want families to have access to home ownership. Are we going to end up incentivizing more student housing in our single family neighborhoods? So I feel like we're going to have to really look hard and close at, you know, the nuances of any code we produce. And, you know, maybe there are situations where we do allow special use that invites more of this in. You know, so there's some level of analysis before it's brought in. But I can take y'all to several properties that have been negatively impacted, you know, with washed out backyards and, you know, 6 or 7 frat boys moving into a property, and cars all over the place. And I had one little old lady who lost her driveway. And, you know, she died inside her house, not being able to get in and out of her home. She was in a wheelchair and had to be carried down steps to a car whenever she had a doctor's appointment. So, you know, I have seen, you know, what's happened in a contemporary culture where everybody has a car. That's not necessarily the case when you have a family, you know, but when you have students moving in, every single one of them has a
Couple of things, and so I won't be sarcastic. First thing, I do want to thank staff, because one of the things that, I don't know if it was Beast or it was Melinda, each committee had a staff person from planning that worked with them. So it's not like these geniuses were geniuses all by themselves. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when I campaigned 8 years ago, and it's definitely 8 years now, I don't even know what the subject was. I don't even know what the question, but I was on a panel. And I said then, if there's a will, you'll find a way. You will find a way if the will is there. Now, all these sad stories about the little old lady and all of that, there's some upbeat stories too. And if there's a will, so my point is, if we've spent the last 8 years talking about housing, and I hear a little bit of drama, I wonder where the will is at. Nobody said this was going to be easy. And the reason we brought it here today was because we wanted to get your feedback so we could tweak it, and appreciate the mayor taking a step to do what he does. Okay? So we voted to bring it here. Because one of the things we do, and we do too much of, is we meet and nothing ever happens. We study and it collects dust. Now, just like you had that morbid story, Fred, I'm gonna ask you to talk about the lady you helped with the duplex.
That was the lady that.
So we had a lady who actually she was on Social Security, and she was looking to buy a home in Athens. Of course, affordability is an issue. What she was able to do, using the funds at First America, she was able to purchase a duplex and live on one side, and the tenants who were there wanted to stay, rent out the other. And her, because of the amount the tenants pay, her mortgage every month for her is only gonna be like $78 a month. Yeah. But she wouldn't have been able to do that without the grant money created. It created an opportunity for her to be able to do that and to remain in Athens, which she's always been.
It's not one piece that's going to be workable by itself. It's not. It's going to take a collaboration with all the departments. Again, I thank the mayor for taking that move. But we need to get our housing, fund up and running. We have to get the land bank up and running. We've got to work with, making people credit worthy. And we need to also find out who, not just numbers. I'm a people person. I'm the one that like to see faces. I want to know, we should go over to, what's that, the extended end? The extended whole entail? Go knock door to door and find out how many of those people could benefit from something like this. I don't know how much they pay, but it's.
They're paying more than pay for rent.
Okay.
There's
And
a
so-
great article in the Atlanta.
I read the article, yeah.
If we go knocking door to door,
Actually.
and we would get not just numbers, we will get people.
Yeah, there's so many families living there. That's one of the things that crushed me. I had seen it a lot in Atlanta, but it blew my mind that it existed here because I have several clients. But you go there, you're right. More than half of them are actually families.
And during the day, that parking lot is empty because they're out working somewhere. You come back in the evening, it is packed. I haven't even heard a whole bunch of crime over there. I haven't even heard the police running back and forth. So please, I appreciate being objective. We want to hear the pros and the cons. The other thing that they mentioned about manufactured homes. Manufactured homes aren't those Rockford home trailer parks no more, okay? We'll be planning a trip to visit Flamingo Home for anybody that wants to go and visit and look at some of the manufactured homes. And right now, we never talk about it, but it's going on. John Q is training his women in construction, building tiny homes. We need to be working together. There's no one answer. No one answer. But now suppose we got John up in here and some more developers and land bank running and stuff. Yeah, we're gonna house some folk. And I don't care what anybody else said. I don't care what the rest of the world is doing. Oh, it's a housing shortage everywhere. I'm just worried about it right here in Athens. And what we can solve now is what we should do. I know people kind of laughed at me when I talked about the mill houses and being $1 million, whatever. But you know what? I thought about that. Those mill houses are so big. They could be transitional homes. They could be a veteran's home. They could be, we never talk about kids aging out of foster care. They age out of foster care and end up on Willow Street. $1 million is worth somebody's life, y'all. It's worth it. And especially when you're talking to stuff. So I let it go by, kind of nudged me a little bit. But you got to think out the box, and you got to want to address this issue. So please, if I sound passionate, I am.
And our first thought should not be the areas of most resistance. There's some neighborhoods where I'm sure that they're not going to spend for it, right? Some of these, high-class neighborhoods. So we think that that's where we're gonna start. We'll never get anywhere. But there's areas of least resistance where a lot of things are going on there, where that's where we have to go, where it can work. But no, we think that, of course, if you make this kind of wide, you're gonna get an uproar from people in certain neighborhoods, not thinking that you're gonna pull a trailer in by their $700,000 house, right? And we're gonna hear all this political chatter. That's not what we're talking about. There's areas of least resistance where a lot of things are going on there, but they're not benefiting the people who traditionally have lived there. So some of this can work, and I'm with the Commissioner Lloyd. If there is a will, there's a way. And somebody told me that a long time ago. And I was a little kid in public housing, and I went on, I could leave that, and I went to college, and I went to college again. I had a great life because I believe If there's a will, there's a way. So again, there's smart folks that have worked on this, there's smart folks in this room, there's smart people in this community. We can figure it out if we're really serious about it.
Got Planning Director Bruce Lonnie with us, and of course, Bruce mentioned, we'll be seeing a resolution. Any input at this point?
Yeah, just real quickly, I want to thank this committee, all the subcommittees, and staff appreciates having the chance to be a part of that discussion. And what we brought to the table was really procedural information, because we weren't trying to manipulate anything that was an outcome. And I think we navigated that. I feel like we did, and I think these results are great. It's very affirming to see this presentation. It's good to revisit these strategies. And we're ready and willing. I would note that the planning department's work program already has these strategies on it. And the mayor commission has already asked us to work on these things. The sequencing of this was to have a new future land use map that set the table for success for implementation. And that's why I wanted to piggyback on the most recent comments is there are places that are appropriate for these types of policies. And for the first application of these types of policies. And that's what the future land use map is anticipating as one of its goals, is finding the place that's appropriate to do these things that are new and different, and in some cases overdue. And so that future land use map will be coming before you on the January, February cycle. That means you will get a presentation from staff next Tuesday night about the proposed new future land use map to replace our existing future land use map. And one of the primary purposes of that policy document is to set the table for these types of strategies to come immediately next.
I got a question for Bruce. So did you go back and change your housing was not one of your issues with affordable housing was not on the original, whatever you call those.
Right. So the word affordability was part of the discussion. Affordability was baked into all the options that were put in front of us, all the goals. We're looking at putting opportunity on the map. So affordability, opportunity, how to grow appropriately was exactly.
So I'll see that now. When I look at whatever you present,
Absolutely.
I will see that this time.
Yes.
Everybody want to take a little break for the third one? Finding myself needing just a very quick break, if everybody wants 5 minutes. All right, thank you all. I really appreciate this group. All right, welcome back, everyone. Just one more item today, and it's our semi-annual update with National EMS and our own Fire Emergency Safety Department on their memorandum of understanding. And so I'm going to turn it over to staff.
All right, so this is our second rendition.
Can I just
Yep,
do some
go
quick
ahead.
intros before you get?
Fine.
This is the guy, obviously, that's driving this, so, but this is a newly promoted Division Chief of Administrative and Support Services, Jonathan Pugh. So I just want to acknowledge his hard work. He's the one that provides all the data that you guys get to benefit from with the monthly reporting as well as the semi-annual performance reviews. And this is Tracy LaFlamme with National EMS. She is the operations manager for National. And this is Sharon Schwartz. She is the regional president of Priority Ambulance, which is the parent company of National EMS. Also in the room, just as resources for you guys to be aware of, Deputy Chief Jeff Kelly, as well as EMS Captain William Wooden, and of course our 911 Administrator Kevin Zapata. So if you have any specific questions as far as operations, as it kind of clarifies this data, you have the right resources in the room to try to clarify that for you. So I will concede to Chief Pugh and let him start. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right. So this is our second rendition of coming before you with the performance data updates. Formats basically the same with different numbers inserted. And this time period is going to cover Q1 of FY26. So that's July through September of 2025. So here you have, and this is speaking for the fire department. The first half of this presentation will be the fire department, and then the second half will be National EMS. I'll let Ms. Tracy take over at that point. So your fire department has 9 engines, 1 hazmat unit, rescue unit, support apparatus, and 3 truck/aerials. As you look in that picture, that is our newest aerial apparatus, which will be housed at Fire Station number 1. So that'll be the new ladder 1. We currently have it. We're having to do some training and hopefully have it in service in a couple of weeks. So pretty excited about that. So I wanted to include that picture right there. So for the fire department, in this, I included fire and EMS calls as far as our system saturation, because if our units are occupied on a fire call, then they're not available to respond on an EMS call. So I thought that was data that needed to be shared. So we didn't have any high utilization events. And as you see, that we categorize that as if 90% of our apparatus are occupied at one time. The highest we got was 13 apparatus occupied on different incidences. Once 13 one time, and that only lasted for 22 minutes. And at that point, somebody got let loose and then went down to 12, so on and so forth. At present, these are where your fire stations, our fire districts are, and then your fire stations are located. So if you look up top, we have a little breakdown of the 3 months that consumed this reporting period, plus those same 3 months of FY25. So Q1 FY25, Q FY26. And just a little comparison back and forth is you can see the numbers were slightly higher for this past period as opposed to a year prior. And then you see a breakdown on the bottom of the call types. And how everything lays out and the percentage of calls. Now, I'll use the word call and incident kind of interchangeably, so if I don't want anybody to get confused, they are the same thing.
Good intent call.
So a good intent call is basically, we get called, well, I'll start with this. So our standard of reporting is report what we see or what we encounter when we get on scene. So somebody called 911 for a person down. Well, we showed up and that person just happened to be sleeping. So we don't really have a way to pay. So they called out of the best intentions of possibly seeing something, and we get there and there just wasn't nothing there, or we get canceled en route because maybe National got there first and realized, hey, we don't need fire here, so they'll cancel us, but we can't write down what National sees. We have to write down what we saw, which was nothing. So it goes down as a good intent call. Now I have, and in these numbers, you can kind of see, I've separated the EMS calls that came in. We got dispatched as an EMS type call. And I really kind of just moved those to the 300 category. So those numbers are more reflective of the calls we ran for EMS. So our response time metrics, so 90% of our responses were under the 9-minute goal that we're trying to hit. And 90% of them actually were right at 7 minutes and 41 seconds, or within 7 minutes and 41 seconds of us being dispatched at the fire stations. And then our average response time was 4 minutes and 45 seconds. We had just under 1,600 incidences, and then some of those EMS calls, vehicle accident, something like that, we'll send more than one unit. So we also like to keep up with how many actual apparatus responses we had. So some calls get more apparatuses to respond, so we can keep up with both of those. So 3 times during the period, we had 4 EMS incidents going on at once. That lasted for an average of 20 minutes and 57 seconds. And that again, these are strictly for the fire department. We don't get called out to every incident that National would get called out for too. These are our chief complaints. It says top 10. We only had a total of 7, and that's why you only see 7 listed here. With chest pain, discomfort being your top one, shortness of breath, seizures, general symptoms. Unconscious, no complaints in adult general exam. Our personnel reported that bystander CPR happened 3 times in this period. 0 times reported of bystander AED, and 16 incidents where we performed CPR. And then we had 6 patients treated with Narcan for the period.
And if I could clarify that, that's the fire department administering Narcan. That's not National or the police department doing that. So
I was gonna ask that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. We know with the Narcan, how much police maybe.
We could probably ask if they can, if they report that out.
That should be on the dashboard of how many.
Really?
Probably on their dashboard.
I think that was asked the last meeting. Yes, sir. I believe you're right.
Yeah, when you talk about the response time, and I just want to clarify, when you guys are given that, like back on, I don't know, whatever page that was, the 741, what is that? When does the clock start ticking?
So the clock for us starts when we receive dispatch from dispatch. So when they tone us out, or they let us know that we're needed at an address.
So you get the dispatch call.
Correct.
Not when you dispatch out. Well, that's my word. Okay.
Right. Yes, ma'am. And then, we section that off in turnout time. So that's between the time we get the dispatch to the time we actually go en route to our travel time. And those 2 combined is your response time.
Okay.
And that way we can kind of, if we're missing the mark, we can narrow down where we can make improvements. Sometimes, travel time, there's not necessarily a lot we can do depending on where road construction or traffic or lights or whatever may dictate. But if we can pinpoint a turnout time that we can improve, we try to do that. And so that, I guess we'll wait till the end for any more questions if you think of them. But at this point, I'll let Ms. Tracy talk about the nationals data.
So for National EMS, this is a Q1 to July through September. We are now in Blue Cross Blue Shield network, in network. So that's a big, huge to-do since the last time. And hopefully with Blue Cross Blue Shield coming into network, hoping other insurance agencies will also follow suit. But that was huge, and it started on 9/1. Our System structure, so total response vehicles, 24 and 12-hour ambulances in service. We have 9, with 1 being a QRV, that QRV being a paramedic response. And then we also have a QRV with a supervisor on it. So we have a total of 2 QRVs. We have a total of 11 transporting ambulances for 911. And then we break that down in a little bit more. So we have 4 at the center station, 4 at East Side, 2 at our headquarters, and 1 at the West Side location.
Where's your center station?
The center station is over here behind the Longhorns. It's off of Old Ipswich Road.
Are all of these in Clarke County?
So the headquarters in West Side are in Oconee. So you have 8 in Athens and then 3 in Oconee. So the next slide is the total response vehicles, and it kind of breaks it down a little bit further. So we have the truck number, which is a 301, 302, how if they are 24, 7 days a week. And then you have 307, which is a 12-hour truck, which is a midship truck. All of those, we say ALS paramedic. And then the 311 and 308, we say BLS, but it's at the advanced level. It's not a basic, it's an EMTA level. And that breaks it down to the location, East Side Center, headquarters and West. We do have the QRV, which is a float paramedic, and the supervisor, which is a float QRV paramedic level as well. The coverage zones, you'll see up there, kind of like the fire department did. We zoned out where our stations were. And we just broke it down to the side of there again.
On those, on the paramedic, like the east side, the total response vehicles, and you said the BLS and paramedic, do you have any numbers on how many are paramedic, have a paramedic actually on them?
Yes, so 3, the east side, or you want the east side only?
Yeah, no, or either one of them.
So anything that's in the ALS paramedic column has a paramedic on it.
All the time?
Correct. And anything in the BLS advanced level has an EMTA on it.
Okay.
Usually 2. And the paramedic has an EMTA and a paramedic on it.
Okay.
System saturation, it is what it is. It's kind of tell you where we are the busiest at the different times of the day. You'll see it's a lot in the mornings, in the afternoon, it'll kind of calm down a little bit, and then it'll ramp back up in the afternoon and back in the evening hours. During the previous quarter, there were 12 times there was no unit available to respond. They had a prolonged response time due to distance, and that's when we utilized fire to come to our rescue. Calls per month. If you look at the raw data, the next page, July 2025 was 1,671. August was 1,809. September was 1,795. If you go back a year from that, we're pretty much in the same allowance of numbers. You know, there's not much change number wise. And then there goes to the next page where it's percent ALS versus BLS, and the BLS what we're calling EMTA. And it just breaks it down further what you wanted, how many paramedics and how many EMTAs were on the trucks. We also have an IFT side, which we have 5 med units on that side. They can be anywhere from Bs all the way up to paramedics. They do back up 911 as needed. So you had an additional 5 trucks that if they're not running transports, they can actually back up on the 911 side. On system processing, urban, alarm processing time is 91.8%. So total response time, we're at 90%. All of our P1 and P2 calls, we gather them together. We get there in 400 of the time at 8:58, and our average response time is 6 minutes and 37 seconds for 31 calls. Total number of non-transports is 31.7, and total number of concurrent incidences, which we've had 4 more ambulances on a call at the same time, is 102.
Can you define what the priority 1 and priority 2 are again?
Priority 1 is lights and sirens. Priority 2 is no lights and sirens.
And who makes that evaluation? When does that get evaluated?
When it comes through the call system, if it's a seizure or cardiac arrest, we're going to go priority 1 with lights and sirens. If it's somebody that says they have the flu or sneezing or coughing, we might bring that back down to no lights and sirens. For non-urban, we're at 11 minutes and 31 seconds for party 1 and party 2 calls. Total number of non-transports is 28.6%. And again, it's the 102 number, or we've been on ambulance calls 4 or more at one time. Average total response time is 9 minutes and 14 cents for party 1 calls at that time too.
I have a quick question. I think it's a quick question. The part on number 4 where you say the number of times all ambulances were out, I take it that back to the other slide that said there were 12 times when there was
So this
no.
is concurrent. This is 4 or more ambulances out at the same time. We have a total of 8 in your service.
So when the 12 times that there was no ambulance available, I guess, I don't know, I guess it was.
That means that all ambulances were out on calls.
But it's not the same as concurrent. And
Concurrent is only 4 or more ambulances out. So we have a total of 8. So the 12 times that had no ambulance available, all 8 ambulances were out on calls.
Do we have the dates for those?
So I guess why are we getting concurrent incidents for half of the trucks?
Because that's all the MOU asked for.
Oh, we just have to ask a better question then. Get the information.
Maybe this will help, I guess, maybe clarify. So
Yeah.
when we're talking system saturation, that's basically all of the resources are tied up. With concurrent calls, it's just letting you know that there's just not one ambulance out doing something. There's half of the ambulances are being utilized, but there's still half of the ambulances still available. So I think at one point that was useful information.
Okay, I see. That's helping me understand how it was asked originally.
Yes, ma'am.
To compare.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. And if you need to tweak it, let us know.
I appreciate the information.
Yes, ma'am.
So for our top 10 chief complaints, we went all the way down from sick person, 947, all the way down to abdominal pain, which is 133 calls for that quarter. So sick person is the majority of the calls. Clinical care outcome, bystander CPR, we had a total of 4. Bystander AED 1, and the GICH survival rate was 1.16, which means that they actually walk out of the hospital after CPR has been started by a bystander, and the outcome is they get to go home. CPR performed, we performed 91 times of CPR. That is our presentation. Clarke County Dispatch is the next one.
So our central dispatch is the only slide that pertains to them. We brought Mr. Zapati in just in case y'all had any questions pertaining to this. But I think the last time all we had was the acronym, which we included on this slide this time. So, but if you have anything else, he's here to answer for that.
So when the 911 call goes out, does it go to the fire department first, or it goes to EMS? I mean, where does it go? Does it go to national?
So if it's a medical call, it'll go down out concurrently. So our CATs we enter all the information, gather our information, put into our CAT integrated dispatch system. We put on a national EMS unit on our end, which actually sends that information over to national EMS, this dispatch. And then we'll also have the fire personnel or fire dispatcher go ahead and dispatch it also to fire if it warrants a concurrent response.
So simultaneously, if the call is being received, National is getting the same information. So they're basically preparing their unit to leave based on what our predetermined response model is, or the request from National will the fire department then respond. Okay.
After visiting the crime center yesterday, I imagine that we will this data may change a little bit.
I would venture to say that we will have vast improvements on reporting of incidents with more, especially specifically in the downtown area where there are more cameras available, officers reporting things in the field as they see it. That will help as far as the reporting the issues to 911. I would imagine that we'll probably stay very consistent for quite some time when it comes from dispatch to fire or dispatch to National, but I think it will speed things up on the front side of things. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask, I got a bunch more questions here. For national, when the start clock start going for your EMP response time?
As soon as Athens-Clarke County sends it over to our dispatch.
Okay, can we get some raw data so that we can see that we've gotten that in the past?
Kevin,
What kind of raw data are you last?
The raw data from the response times, like, there was a while back where there was a spreadsheet that had the incident county, the Clark County, the time national receives a call, the time the 911 ambulance unit is notified en route and arrives on scene, so that we just have a little bit more validity on the response times. I would just be interested in seeing some.
Okay, we can try to work on that.
Good.
Kevin can also work on that, we'll need your help on that to get that over.
And I will state, we can provide that as we did last time. That was not originally part of the MOU, so that's why that.
Right, that's what I'm at.
In front of you this time, but we can work on that, yes, ma'am.
I am concerned about the paramedics. I did have someone tell me that there was not always a paramedic on the national ambulances. Someone who's working in the area, so that continues to be a concern of mine as well.
If you'd like to come see our schedule, I'll be more than open to show that to you, show you that there are paramedics over there on those trucks.
Okay, well,
And like
that
I
would be
said,
great.
if you'd like to come to my office, I will gladly show it to you.
Okay, great. We'll do that. All right, so your office in Athens-Clarke County?
It's on 1021 Lambkin Branch Drive.
Okay, good. And for dispatches, now that we have our dispatchers, are all our ACC dispatches, those have that emergency medical?
Yes, all ACC 911 dispatchers are EMD certified.
Okay, do you stay on the calls through the whole?
Yes, so we get all the information from the caller. We provide, in certain cases, walk them through how to do CPR. We give also other life-saving efforts if it's warranted. If someone's having a seizure, put them in a recovery position, and stuff like that. So we will give those callers that information, gather a lot of pre-hospital care kind of information also to provide it to National EMS before they arrive, as well as the fire department.
Do you stay on the call with National?
National's not on the call at all.
I mean, what about when you transfer it over to National?
They're getting it through the computer.
It's transferred over to the computer. We no longer transfer the phone call from 911 dispatch to National EMS. ACC 911 takes care of the call from beginning to end.
From beginning to end on all the calls, okay.
And that just speaks to the EMD. That's the benefit of the EMD is.
Well, I thought so. I just wanted to check on that. I
Yes, ma'am.
remember that.
It would crack at the seams if we had them transfer in the middle of that process.
Makes sense to me. And the urban versus rural, do you guys have a map or something that can we see that map?
Yeah.
So I know
Get
what
that over
that's included in urban versus rural, because, and that's not in there. And then, do we have our, I see we have our health EMS person there. What is happening now? If I had a cardiac arrest and the fire department, you guys talked about it, and are you guys giving out meds yet on that? So you said there were 20 of those where you guys weren't available, but I know the fire department goes to a lot more than 20 calls, right? Are you guys giving out medications yet on that? So if you get to my house first, I'm having a cardiac arrest?
No, ma'am, we're not.
We're not.
So upon fire department arrival, we'll perform basic life support. The CPR, American Heart Association standards, we apply AED, ventilate the patient.
Are we getting closer to a place where you'll be able to do a little bit more if there is a paramedic on there?
We are currently, as a department, at the emergency medical responder level.
Yeah.
So we have to, as a department, get up to have a robust set of services. So we are working towards that goal, yes, ma'am. But that's something we want to holistically do and not have one or two paramedics specifically equipped with medications. When they're responding on a fire truck, those medications usually stay locked and have to be monitored and controlled. So it has to be all or nothing.
Yeah, because those 20 calls where no one was available and you guys came as.
But what we are doing though is providing the interventions that we can do, CPR, and we are making sure that the airways are viable airways. We're doing what we can to stabilize and triage the patient while we're waiting on the EMS to be there. but many times the EMS is there before us. So it's all specifically to the data, whatever the data is telling us.
Thank you.
Everything?
That's all I got now.
Listen.
Yeah, I'm looking at the system saturation table and it's kind of hard to read.
Yeah, I would say, we said it's not a lot to fit into one.
A list of those dates when 12 dates where unit was available. Kind of do an assessment of what might have been going on in the community.
Well, I put notes on here for those that when the unit was available, it was 12 of those. I would like to understand, because sometimes it's fire gets there on scene, we mark that as no, and then one of us will clear and be able to go and see. So I'm wondering how long, but also what type of calls it were, because I think that tells a more comprehensive story.
Yeah, and
the dates.
and also what kind of community events might have been
Right,
happening.
right.
And it looks like there are only 11 marked on the table, but you said there were 12. Could you get a little more dive insight?
Yeah, I have that marked down as well. I think it tells just that overall a bigger story. I'm impressed you could see the room.
Yeah, so, with national, so appreciate you all taking Blue Cross Blue Shield now. Are y'all taking any other?
Well, working on it.
Yes.
That's my job, right? And so we've got Blue Cross and Shield, like we've got them, and now we want to go get the other.
Some of us have to shoot, cause actually, we got kicked out Blue Cross Blue Shield, now I'm on Humana.
That's actually next on my list, so.
It was a big hurdle just to get the Blue Cross Blue Shield, so we're hoping the other will follow suit.
We did, to my colleague's point, Medicare though, cause I'm on
Oh,
Medicare.
yeah, we are. We always have been, yes.
Okay.
I want to thank your all's service. For me, I needed you. I was in Oconee County, so I'm not going to complain about how long it took to do the dispatch, but I can tell you that the firemen, it's much better than the bystander. Although, people try to help you when you're in a situation and they don't always have the right thing to do that can calm you till the ambulance comes. So anyway, y'all do a great job. Thank you.
What else? I appreciate the presentation, the data, and a couple follow-up items. I know you'll get to that.
Yes.
All right, thank you much, everybody. We'll see you next veteran agenda setting session, 6 p.m.